Thank you. Well, hi everybody. I'm gonna share my screen. We'll jump right in here. I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm Moe Carrick, and if you're looking for this session that's now on the screen, then you're in the right place. I'm super happy to see you here, and I want to apologize at first blush for this rather shocking appearance on my face. But my dermatologist today suggested I use it as an infomercial. I am a melanoma survivor. I've had 2 different melanomas in the past 30 years and also squamous and basal cell cancer. And every 6 months I go in for checkup. And sometimes they have to do a deeper dig than others. And so today was supposed to be a little one, but they had to do a little bit more. And so they left me with this bandage on, and I said, but I'm giving a presentation. It's not really ideal. And they said, oh, well. So thank you for tolerating that. And I'm really happy to see you. And I hope the conference is going well. Feel free to weigh in on the chat. I'd love to hear some of your highlights of the experiences that you've heard about so far, anything you've learned. A good way to communicate me will be in the chat. And so let me know how it's going for you. I haven't been able to join in any sessions this morning, but I'm going to for the rest of the week. So I'm really looking forward to it. So my company is Moementum Inc. We are a B Corp. We've been a B Corp since 2014, and we're located in Bend, Oregon. And I'm really delighted actually that this conference is virtual this year because it's making it easier for people like me to be engaged. I've wanted to come for the last couple of years over to the Valley, and I haven't been able to. So it's really nice to be able to do virtual, even though virtual has its limits. So before I just sort of jump right into the topic and the content that I had planned, I would love to see in the chat, and actually I'm going to stop my share for a minute. We'll come back to those slides. Anything that you're feeling particularly provoked you to join this session. I know you have some options, but anything you're hungry for today around that topic, how to show up and lead in these unprecedented times. These are some wild times that we are experiencing. So as a way of helping me get a sense of where you're at today, would you put in the chat anything about why you picked this session, what you're hoping for, just with what you've seen in the topic would be great. I'm also asking, how's it going out there for you, leaders and employees in these wild times? And if you don't want to weigh in on the chat, you can take yourself off mute and you can actually speak up. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the privilege of being employed and being able to work virtually when others cannot. Absolutely. Sometimes we think about that as a little bit of survivor's guilt. How to stay open when things are hard. Thanks, Hillary. How to lead managing employees during these times. Things are so turbulent. How do we ground ourselves? Absolutely. Maintaining engagement with your team. That's a big thread, especially with the physical separation. These are awesome. Fulfilling the B Corp mission and prioritizing DEI at the same time. Helping clients. These are great. Keep them coming. I'm gonna go ahead and start the content, but I love seeing some of why you came and what you're hungry for. And I share many of them. Balance. How do we highlight the positives? These are wild times, aren't they? I am 58 years old, and I can tell you that I've never experienced I've never really experienced times like this as a leader. And so it's exciting from that perspective, in that it gives us an opportunity to actually figure out how we want to show up. But let me applaud and lift up that you're here, that you did it. You made it to this conference. You made it to this screen, to this session. And I know what you had to do to probably push other things back to enable you to show up. And in particular, you're showing up for your own development, for your own learning, whether you're leading people in your system or you're not. It's not insignificant. So thank you for being here and taking the time to show up. So some of you may find this graph is a little bit familiar. And by the way, I'm not going to say a whole lot more about myself. If we had more time, I'd want to hear, any questions you might have of me. You can find out most of what you need to find out about me on the interweb, or you can go to my website at moecarrick.com. But I'm not going to waste time kind of telling you about me, other than what I would like to share today is that I too am a leader of a company in these unprecedented times. I'm also a family member. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, and a friend, and they're rocking. And the tools that I hope to offer you today are tools I'm also hoping to use myself, and that I do practice every day, because as I said, I think these are unprecedented times between the COVID-19 global pandemic, the racial conversations that are deepening at the same time that they're so challenging for us as we look at the unrest in our society, the political landscape, and how we're navigating that right now with a lot of polarization, an upcoming election. The list goes on and on and on. So again, good job for being here. What I'm hearing from a lot of my clients is that this is how life looks right now. And this was true even before COVID. If this feels familiar to you, this little image, just give a thumbs up. Right? The dark green is work and the light green is everything else. That's sometimes how it feels. So you can see these little tiny spots of light green in the screen. And this dynamic for leaders especially, but really for employees in every sector, has been made worse by our devices, which we love because they allow us a lot of flexibility, and they create just amazing opportunities for us to multitask and to stay connected. But they also create some real challenges around the types of ways that we have boundaries around work and life, and how we integrate those two things as being the same. And so if this chart feels familiar to you and you feel like you're working harder than ever, I believe you. You may in fact be. And I personally don't necessarily feel that work and life are different. I think they're the same. They're pretty integrated in terms of our identity. So I'm less worried about the volume of time in our lives that is in the light green than I am how that's impacting you as a leader and how it's impacting your workforce. And I want to talk a little bit more about that today. And in particular, I've made it my business to really think a lot about, in companies large and small, what is the difference between thriving and happiness? And one of the outputs of, in particular, the shadow effect of Silicon Valley, in the last 30 years of business, in particular the big 5 tech companies, which aren't really as present in our sector as companies emphasizing sustainability, triple bottom line, and business as a force for good. The shadow effect of Silicon Valley, though, has really impacted how we think about what makes a company good for people. And some of those shadow effects end up influencing whether we have a model in our organization about are people happy. And it's my belief, and I've spent a lot of time researching the differences between happiness in employees and thriving, because in part, I know that rewarding work is not always happy. And we can actually create temporal or fleeting happiness by doing things that have been championed often through that shadow effect of Silicon Valley and great places to work surveys, et cetera. I sometimes call those surface perks. We bring beer and pizza in every day, or we have nap pods, or we have on-site dry cleaning. We might get that temporary burst of happiness or contentment, but to create that longer term thriving, that employee and that engagement with that employee that's sustainable over time, we need to be looking for something very different than fleeting happiness. And especially right now, when times are so challenging and when it's hard to even remember what it is that's rewarding about the work and why we come to it. I really do believe that a brave space workplace is more than happy. It's about more than happy. And I'm hoping to share with you a couple of tools that will help you with your workforce and in your workplace, whether you supervise a team, own a company, or are working independently. Some of you, I'm sure, and I'm curious, you can weigh in on the chat or just even raise your hand or raise your blue hand by clicking next to your name on the participant list. How many of you have in the past 8 months felt burned out? I'm seeing some hands. I'm seeing some also like this, which is like a sign that says, yes, yes, I am. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I didn't know I was burned out, by the way, until I contracted shingles, which is different than my current face situation. But burnout is really common right now, and it's really dangerous for us as humans, but also for our businesses, because burnout can be very hard to recover from. And if you've felt burnout, I feel you. And someone mentioned in the chat that the challenge of having children at home in school that you're responsible for supporting, having elder parents in COVID-19, the changing environment to virtual, combined with all of the work that we still have to uplift, is contributing to a tremendous amount of burnout. We're seeing a huge uptick, as you may already have talked about today, in mental health issues, in anxiety and depression in every population, including the workforce at large, excuse me. And I think that this little list of simple symptoms from the Maslow burnout inventory resonate with almost everyone I talk to right now. Emotional exhaustion, a feeling of depersonalization about work, and a diminished sense of personal accomplishment, which makes it really hard to get up and do the hard things at work today. And our people are burned out as well. So even if you're not feeling burnout, I want you to just think about the idea that burnout is out there lingering, potentially as a threat to you and to your workforce. And we want to do everything we can to avoid it. Now, the other kind of anchor concepts I wanted to open with and have you think about is the idea of what happens to us when things are changing. Now, most of you, I'm sure, have been exposed to different models of organizational change. This one is a common one. It looks at kind of a three-phase process of change, and it's not my model. It's been adapted by a number of thinkers. But one of the things I like about this model of change is this idea that anything that we experience that changes how we do things has both a change impact on us and our people, as well as a transition impact. And the difference is that the change itself starts with the outcome. In other words, if I'm implementing a new billing system, that outcome is I'm going for a more efficient billing system, for example. Transition, though, is what happens inside of my employees and me. It starts with wherever people are. And so change and transition are very different. And part of why I wanted to anchor us in this idea is that one of the challenges in these unprecedented times is that everything's changing. Healthcare practitioners are seeing patients virtually. Students aren't in school. School administrators aren't meeting with their teams. Businesses are working virtually. Manufacturing companies have had to extend their operations. Whatever unique business dynamics you face, my sense is it is not the same as it was on March 1st of 2020. At least I know my business wasn't. March 27th references for me what I now have affectionately come to call the big die-off of when all of my events of gathering with people face-to-face began to drop off the calendar, requiring me and my team to pivot in almost a 100% way. So what happens in a transition is that we are one way with a vision of where we might be, and we need to reorganize ourselves and everything about how we do things. And this is, I think, nicely illustrated by this little graph, right? We're going from the red square and the blue dot, which is the vision of where we want to go. And then we have the blue dot ultimately. And you can see the three phases of any transition here: an ending, a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And with any change that you're facing in your company right now as a leader, I'd love for you to think about and ask yourself the question, where do I think my workforce is right now with blank transition, with any one of the transitions that you may have made, knowing that phase one is always an ending. Change always starts with loss, right? So for me, when I looked at the big die-off on March 27th, my company and I personally experienced loss of delivering consulting and training and development and coaching to people in a non-physical way. My world went from traveling all over the world, supporting clients in a hands-on way, to delivering everything via Zoom. There's other pivots, but that's one of them. That felt like loss because I'm 58 and everything I've learned to date has trained me to do what I have done historically in person that changed with COVID-19. And so like any loss, when we're in an ending, we feel denial, shock, resistance, anger, frustration, bargaining, etc. And then we move over time, and with energy, we move into the neutral zone, which is often a period of a lot of confusion and undirected energy and ambiguity, which over a period of time, hopefully at our best in any transition, moves us into phase 3, which might be the new beginning, which is where we start to feel hopeful again. We maybe feel safe enough to experiment. We feel commitment and understanding. Now, this transition is happening for companies as well, for example, in their emphasis and focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as an example. If I'm a company that's newly woken up to the importance of inclusion and equity and belonging to how my business runs, I may be experiencing or already have experienced some endings of how I used to do things based on what I didn't know or what I didn't practice. And I may now be in that messy neutral zone of confusion that says, okay, what is it that I'm going to do? How will we be different? What has to change here? And ultimately, I'm heading for a beginning that maybe I can't see yet, but that I hope that I'll get there. And what we want as leaders is to kind of shorten the neutral zone as efficiently as we can to get to the beginning. But we can't rush that process because human beings are messy, we are imperfect, and we go through transition at our own pace. And with the group that we have on the call today, we've got about 65 people on the call today, each of you is going through the transitions that you face in your own time based on who you are and how you're hardwired. So that creates a challenge for us as leaders, right? Because we've got to deal with a wide variety of people's needs and differences in change and transition. But I invite you to think about this idea that change always starts with loss, always starts with an ending. So a question I have for you, as we tuck into how to show up and lead in these times, is a really basic one, and weigh in on the chat for me if you would, or take yourself off mute and sing out. Why do you work? Why do you do the hard thing and get up every single day and come to your Zoom screen or wherever you go, if you're working in person, lucky you, to do the thing?
I love what I do.
You love what you do. Awesome.
Making a difference.
To make a difference.
I like using my brain in a way that working with my toddler or family does not use my brain.
Awesome. As challenging as that is, right? Yeah, good. Thank you, Jamie. Serving others, work feels fulfilling, provide financially, value, satisfaction, gives a sense of purpose, connection, personal growth, tangible thinking. Awesome. Makes life interesting. Make an impact. Make more money. I'm here for a reason. I love my product. I want to find collaborations. These are great. These are getting me excited about getting up and going in the morning. A responsibility to employees and customers. Survival. Lots of common threads. Thank you. Keep them coming. This question has really captivated me as a consultant in organizations for a long time, because I have seen over a wide variety of systems, public, private, nonprofit, for-profit, government. I have seen a variety of employees at every level, from the very top to the very front line, really struggle with finding engagement, meaning, and purpose with work. And I've been wondering for the past 30 plus years, what is it going to take? Because we know today some of the same things we've known for many, many years about what it takes for people to thrive. So why aren't we kicking it yet at work? It's part of why I decided to be a B Corp. Whoops, that slide we've already seen. I'm going the wrong direction. So that question, why do we work, has been the basis of some of my research. I've published 2 books, both are bestsellers. My first one was called Fit Matters, How to Love Your Job. I wrote it with Cami Dunaway, who at that time was the SVP of Sales and Marketing at Nintendo. She's now the CMO of Duolingo. And we really wanted to better understand the dynamics of how to create positive work fit. Cami was one of those professionals who at a senior level took a job. She left Yahoo, joined Nintendo, and she thought it would be the job of her dreams. Has anybody ever had that happen? And then it doesn't work out. And that's what happened to Cami. The job of her dreams turned out not to be the job of her dreams, and she only lasted 2 years, and it broke her heart. I was coaching that team, the president and the executive team at Nintendo at that time, and we joked we should write a book about this. We later went on to do the research. And so this book is really especially for job seekers, but also for employers to figure out, how do I get that alchemy right of getting the right people into my organization? Brave Space Workplace came out in 2019, and it was really my attempt to put down in black and white what I think it takes to make a company fit for human life, because I'm tired of seeing companies that don't work for people. because it is people that make companies great. And I'm noticing in these unprecedented times right now that the foundations that my research points to in Brave-Space Workplace have never really been more true. And by the way, I'm happy to share these slides after our presentation with attendees if you'd like. So the combined research of those two books and my years as a consultant inside and outside organizations has led me to these 7 things. And you've just named most of them. So you've made this part of the presentation really easy. And I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. One is to meet our basic needs. This is about one that many of you have mentioned in the chat. This is about our cash and non-cash compensation. In a capitalist society, this is how we meet our basic needs. It's how we provide food, shelter, water, safety, and security for ourselves and people we love. And this one stays in first place. It's the only one that has a place amongst the 7. The rest of them are pretty random based on the individual. But this place stays in, this reason why we work stays in first place unless 2 conditions are met. One is that we feel paid fairly compared to others like us. And the other is that we can meet our basic needs, which is why minimum wage jobs here in North America are generally so challenging for people in terms of why they come to work, because it's difficult to impossible in most towns and cities across our nation to meet your basic needs on a minimum wage job, even if you're working full time and overtime. So it creates a real problem, and this one tends to stay there. But if those 2 conditions are met, this one, our financial drive, our salary needs, tends to fall to the bottom of the pile of our primacy around why we go to work, and is overcome by some of these other 6. And you've named most of these. One is to contribute. This is about being able to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, something that matters in a bigger sense. And Maslow had this on his hierarchy of needs that most of you probably remember from high school, but he had it kind of a little farther up the pyramid. But we want to be able to contribute to something, to know that something we're doing mattered. We also come to work because we want to be seen. This is about being seen and being known, having someone know our name, maybe a little bit about our story. As human beings, we depend on being seen because we're hardwired for social connection. My 19-year-old daughter, when she was in high school, was really struggling with school. And she got a job here in Bend, where I live, as a dishwasher. And for a kid who could hardly get to class, I was amazed that she got to work every single day on time. And I said, wow, what is it that's motivating you? It's kind of a hard job. It's a dishwasher, but you seem to really love it. She said, well, the thing is, Mom, they know who I am and they're counting on me to show up. And I thought that was such a powerful example of what it means to be seen. If she didn't come to work, someone would notice. And that matters to us. Fourthly is our need for human connection. This one, Maslow had a little off in his hierarchy. That's not just me saying it. Other researchers and theorists have said this, because he had our need for love and belonging above our basic needs for survival. But we now know that our need for human connection is as important to us as food, shelter, water, safety, and security. Said another way, if we as human beings do not connect with other human beings, we will perish. Vivek Murthy, who was our Surgeon General under previous administrations, declared loneliness an epidemic here in the US. And an interesting side note is that men suffer disproportionately from it. The United Kingdom appointed a new minister in 2018, a minister of parliament, and their title is the Minister of Loneliness. And their singular job is to reduce isolation, especially in their rural areas. This is serious. And of course, it's not made better by a global pandemic. But we have under the surface, all of us, a need for connecting with other human beings, and we bring it right into the workplace. We don't wear a sign on our chest like Paddington Bear that says, please connect with me, but we might as well. And your employees are carrying that need also. Fifthly, some of you mentioned this, we need to learn, we want to grow, we want to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. Sixth is to feel supported, and in particular, this is about feeling supported to take risks. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the research by Margaret Heffernan, by Google's Aristotle Project, by others around the role that psychological safety and social capital plays to team health. Teams do better when they know that their team members have their back. This is about knowing that when we end up face down in the dirt because we make a mistake or we say the wrong thing, that someone is still going to support us anyway. It's really an important motivator for us to come to work. And you'll notice I call this to feel supported, not to feel safe. Because as employers, I don't think we can guarantee safety. Everything we do that matters carries risk with it. How many of you have ever applied for a job you didn't get? How many of you have ever loved someone who didn't love you back? Everything we do that matters carries risk. But in order to manage that risk, we benefit from the support of others. And then lastly, as a need for why we come to work, is our need to make our lives work. And of course, we're seeing this really uptick in younger generations, in the Generation X and the Generation Y, as they're now calling them, the Zers that are right behind. We want to have our lives work. Entering generations, like many of you on the call, have seen your parents, people like me, suffer, particularly in the post-2007, 2008 recession, but I'm sure we'll see a backlash from our current times as well, which is that work and life are integrated and we want to feel centered on what really matters, and we don't want our work to overshadow that. I certainly see that in myself and in my children. So when we think about these 7 needs, then you might ask yourself, which one is primary for you right now? Because my research suggests that these are temporally sensitive, meaning they change over time. And that certainly rings true for me. Early in my career, I was a wilderness guide. I worked for Outward Bound and Knowles all over the mountains of the American West and the Northeast and the Southeast, and wonderful career. Did it for 10 years, loved it. My needs at that time were very different of my job than they are now, as someone who's getting up closer to the possibility of maybe eventual retirement. So your needs of work may be different today than they were yesterday, and your employees that work for and with you may have needs that vary, and there's no right or wrong around these. But I think as leaders, it's incumbent on us to remember that these are the needs that our people in some shape or form are bringing into the equation when they say, yes, they want to work for us. And it's also why we get up every day and do what we do, right? Now, people often ask me, well, no, employers can't be expected to meet all of those needs that human beings have of work. And I say, yes, that's true. But by the same token, if you want your workforce and you to be functioning on all cylinders, you ought to be mindful of how these needs play out in the partnership between you and your people. So the reality is that organizations like yours and mine have to find the right complex alchemy of actions and strategies that activate the talents of their people for success. That's how we do the hard things. And I'm not kidding when I say alchemy, because the work of my profession is science, right? Organizational development is a type of science, it's behavioral science. There's data behind the work of people-centered companies, but there's also pixie fairy dust and emotional nuances of the messy, complex humans that we are that we can't measure, which makes it challenging for us as leaders of business to figure out what's the right thing to do. Now, a little side note is that my research also points, in addition to the 7 things we need from work, to these 5 primary toxicities that we see in the workplace. And I debated putting this slide in today because I know that we're all B Corp minded, consistently thinking companies around all of the business for the common good as a force for good. That's where my mindset leads as well. But I see even in B Corps and even in companies that have really strong social, environmental, and other missions, I still see these toxic behaviors showing up. And they have shown up in my organization as well. So I'm not calling the kettle black. I really believe that we all, when we're not being thoughtful, mindful leaders, run the risk of creating toxicity in our system. So one of them is 24/7 access in our devices. I mentioned that already. not having boundaries around them, not understanding how they're tools, but can also trap us. Another toxic presence is a lack of inclusion, and in particular, I would add belongingness. Creating organizations that fail to acknowledge the systemic advantage that unfairly benefits some and not others, and to think about how they want to navigate their business in that context so that it really is a business where all are welcome. We know business results are better with a diverse and inclusive workforce across race, gender identity, physical ability, etc. And yet we're failing to make that happen. An erosion of time to think is another toxic dimension I see in organizations. We get into what I sometimes think of as the do-do loop, which is that we do stuff and then we do more stuff. And we get measured by the action that we take rather than the quality and candor of our thinking. And yet that's kind of ironic, right? Because as leaders, most of us are hired or we grow into our role because of the quality and candor of our thinking. So we need to buy back some time to think. Some of you might be familiar with the term deep work. Have some of you heard about that? Deep work is the work that we have to enter into in order to do it well. It's anything that's complex, writing, analysis, creating a project, innovating. That work takes a minimum of 2 hours for us to get there, and it can't be interrupted or fragmented. So we really need to resist that toxic tendency. A fifth is leaders who are bad for people. And it's easy to keep leaders who are bad for people on station. We're certainly seeing this play out in some of our political dynamics right now. And we don't serve our organizations and the people in them when we keep leaders who are bad for people without either training them, mentoring them, coaching them, or moving them along if they can't evolve patterns of showing up that are good for people. And then lastly is a failure to tell the truth. This has to do with the ways in which we are honest with each other and bring hard conversations to the surface. One of my mentors is Dr. Brene Brown. You'll see her influence in my language, especially in a few minutes. I'm certified in her approach, The Daring Way and Dare to Lead. And she talks about a resistance to tough conversations being the most common variable in her research about cultures who lack courage. We have to find ways to talk about what's hard and come through to the other side. And that's where telling the truth becomes so important. So feel free to weigh in on the chat any of those dimensions of toxicity that particularly are problematic for you, that you see or that you feel. And I'd love to see that. And then let me share with you this definition of how I see a brave space workplace. I see it at its best as one where people can show up as they are, both perfect and flawed, because we are, and do great things together. A brave space workplace activates, enlivens, and tenderly supports the complex humans that we are so that we can bring all of ourselves to work every day. And this is hard in normal times, so it's exponentially hard now as well. But we know, and you all know as leaders in organizations, those of you that are, that there are some things that are more expensive than employee churn. And one of them is keeping employees on station that are only bringing a fraction of their greatness. Because that employee is taking a spot, but they're bringing the thinnest slice of who they really are. And I don't expect that on every day we bring 100% of our greatness to work. It is work after all, not summer camp. But if we can bring a higher percentage of our great stuff to work, our companies will do better and we will do better. So in my framework, what I wanted to share with you a bit today is that there are 5 levers for getting to a brave space workplace. And most of these are not, this is not rocket science, right? Most of these are going to make sense to you, especially if you're currently leading an organization. But I thought it might be helpful to just look at them on the screen as a set of tools for you to think about in terms of which one might you want to uptick a bit right now. The first one is the biggest one. It's what I call the WHO, the human essentials. And it has two acts to it. The first is leaders with head and heart habits. That's where that Dare to Lead curriculum, for example, becomes so valuable. And the second act is teams who care, that creation of social capital. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But for me, this lever one is like the gateway to the other five. So I find I often start with organizations around how are they doing with the who. And one of the reasons why I think the B Corp movement and the sustainability movement is so powerful right now is that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that people are what make companies great, and that leaders need more than cognition in order to mobilize their workforce. So we got to get this one wired first. But the other four matter too. The what, being a conscious culture. Culture starts with the founders. It's embedded in the values, whether they're implicit or explicit. And when our culture is conscious, it helps. It helps our organization to thrive and to stay grounded. The third lever is the where and the when. I'm sure you all pay a lot of attention to this already, but purposeful design, especially in the people arena. Anything that has to do with our business can be designed, right? From how we have conversations to how we reward performance, how we talk about performance, how we meet, how we hire, how we move people along. Design matters, and people benefit from design that takes into account the complexities that we bring as humans, because let's face it, we as people have issues, right? And we bring them to work. And that's not going to change. So design helps us to work within that construct that we are both perfect and flawed at work as well as at home. The fourth lever is the why. That's meaning and context and color, right? That's not only why does my organization exist, what's its place in the world, but why does this particular job exist? If you like to listen to podcasts, one of my favorites is Shankar Vedante, The Hidden Brain. And he has a great podcast called Bullshit Jobs. And he goes out and talks to people who don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And I will tell you, it's not a very happy story, right? But we really need as leaders to make sure we can answer that question. Why is somebody doing that job that they're doing? And if we can't answer it, it does beg the question, why are they doing that job? And then lever five, the how, I call loosely the soft stuff and being real. And this circles right back up to lever one, but it primarily has an emphasis on creating a culture of belonging. And what is it we have to do differently in order to manifest that? Now, when you think about these five levers, you might enjoy this definition of what a leader does. This is not my definition. This one comes from Brené Brown. She defines a leader as someone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people or processes and who has the courage to develop that potential. And if you haven't thought of yourself as a leader with those terms, I encourage you to, because there's a lot in this definition that I love. First of all, it's not dependent on positional hierarchy. It also focuses on people as well as processes. And that beautiful X factor of a leader who has the courage to notice someone's potential, to call it out. And I believe that we all have that potential in us. Because what's real right now in COVID times, as well as in non-COVID times, is that people know their company and people know your company through their immediate supervisor. Full stop. So if you're the CEO of your organization or the founder, but you've got people working for you that manage people, it matters less how terrific you are than how those frontline leaders are. Because that's how people know your company. And historically here in North America, we invest very, very much more money in executive development than we do frontline development. And it creates a challenge because employees report to those frontline leaders and may have a negative experience. So for me, there's really two questions that we always want to be thinking about. And they're pretty basic. You can see them on the screen here. Who am I and who am I with you? And yet the answers to these questions activate particularly that lever one of creating a brave space workplace. Who am I has to do not only with what are my credentials and my background, but what motivates me, what pushes my buttons, where am I gifted, where am I not very skilled, what do I think about you, what's my emotional landscape, am I burnout or not? And then when I apply those same questions to you, we get that full cycle of data that allows us to activate a real partnership. And I know I only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to have you really think about this in terms of this question of how should I show up and lead right now? My number one suggestion, and if you remember nothing from my session today except this, I hope you do. Put your own oxygen mask on first. They don't say that to you on the plane because it's funny. They say that to you because you can't help somebody else. I always think about it when they say that on the plane, because as a mom, my kids are grown now, but when I used to travel with them, I used to always think, you know, I would put it on them first. I'm like the mama bear, you know, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, but I think I'm just going to bail after this one.
Oh, hang on, we got it. Somebody's not on mute. Somebody's not on mute.
I'm not bailing.
No judgment on anyone who wants to bail. So part of putting your own oxygen mask on first is self-compassion. And if you haven't thought about self-compassion in a while, you might go check out, you can just Google Kristen Neff self-compassion.
Sounds like you're muted, Mo.
There we go. Sorry, I got accidentally muted when all got muted. I was saying that self-compassion is really empathy for self. And I would definitely recommend you complete Kristen Neff's self-compassion index on your website if you want to see how you're doing. When I saw how I was doing.
Can you put that on the notes? Kristen who?
Oh, Kristen Neff. Yeah, let me type it in here also. Self-compassion and empathy are my two golden tools right now in these times because of the level of vulnerability we're feeling. Vulnerability is just anything that makes us feel uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And for most of us right now, that's pretty much everything. It's pretty much everything. So having some ways that we can use that three-legged stool of wholeheartedness, our cognition, which is our brains and what we know, our feelings, which is our emotional landscape, or our affect, and our behavior, which is what we do and how we show up. When we really practice those three legs of the stool equally, we become better leaders. But oftentimes we have one that's more strong than the others. So my suggestion for you in terms of how you lead right now, and this connects to self-compassion and empathy, is that knowing the emotional landscape of your team, as well as of yourself, and being able to tend to their fears and feelings with information, with empathy, with care, is one of the most important things you can do right now. It's how you're going to help them navigate the stresses that they feel and the consequences on their adrenal system and stay grounded. And that includes you, by the way. Being curious will really help with that. Sitting in curiosity, asking ambiguous and personal questions. If you can't show up physically, do show up on Zoom. And these are the same behaviors that show up when you get emotionally hooked, which we are all very vulnerable to doing right now. And it's okay that we get emotionally hooked. We are human. But what we want to try to do is not offload hurt onto others by behaving badly, by speaking harshly, by saying things we don't mean, etc. I mentioned that empathy was one of our most important tools. I will send in the slide deck, you'll see a little video if you haven't seen it. It's Brene Brown's voice with a little animation about these 4 ultimately 5 steps of empathy. You'll notice there's no step here in empathy of problem solving. Empathy is not about solving someone's problem. It's about believing their story and recognizing the emotion that underpins it, period. It's feeling with each other. It's feeling with each other. So what I'd love for you to think about is if there's anything you've heard me talk about that you could use to put into practice about how you show up. And sometimes just asking that question is enough. And maybe it's just, oh, put my own oxygen mask on first, or try empathy when I'm looking to make connection. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those, either one of those two things, right? And I'd love to share with you, and I'm going to put up here, I'm going to come back to you are enough, but I have some, oh, where's my slide? Here it is. If you want to text me your email to this number, I'll send you a free PDF of 25 ways to show up, as well as a chapter from Brave Space Workplace. I'd love to stay in touch and hear more about you. This 45 minutes goes by really fast. And I'll probably learn more about you at other sessions through this conference, which I can't wait. But just text your email to that number and we'll make sure you get those items today. But that previous slide, I know some of you might be writing this down, that previous slide is how I want to end. Because, and I'm going to say it a couple of times and I want you to just take it in. You are enough. 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 Whether you're leading a company or you're serving as an employee of a company or you're just starting one, who you are and how you're showing up is enough right now, even though it's imperfect. And sometimes I think that's the best we can do, is to stay grounded in a mantra that says, I am enough, I have enough to lead right now. And I can be scared and lead. I can be anxious and lead. I can be unsure and lead. I can be hopeful and lead. I can be me and lead. So I know we're out of time and I'm going to stay on for a few minutes. If anybody doesn't have to rush off and you want to ask a question or you want to just make a comment, I'm happy to be here, but I really, really appreciate you coming. I hope you've found a grain of something helpful and I'd love to hear more from you through the conference or via email. So do feel free to make a comment. Thank you everybody for the nice comments in the chat. Or if there's a question, because we had to buzz through some things. Somebody asked me yesterday, since nobody's bravely asking a question, somebody said, what would you say is the most important thing for me in terms of showing up? And I said, just be there. Don't worry as much about being there in the right way or saying the right thing. Just be there. There is a reminder from Cassandra. There's a movement break in the main room. And so head on there. Our bodies are really important to take care of right now. So go to it. Thank you, organizers, for hosting me in this conference. And thank you all for showing up.